Everybody, hope you're doing well. I am currently in a village not too far away from Pokrovsk. I am with my cameraman, Devon, and I wanted to introduce him to you guys because he's going to be part of an upcoming documentary, and I wanted to talk about that, but also talk about what's going on here because the violence in Pokrovsk in this area has upticked to an extreme level. You can't walk on the streets anymore without being hunted by drones. To go 500 meters in the city from building to building, as we were able to, I was able to get into Pokrovsk. It was extremely difficult, and it is a very dangerous situation, and I am filming a documentary to try to show that, and I wanted to take this moment to describe the violence, but also to introduce Devon. So first off, Devon, could you talk a little bit about what you've done before, your work, what you've done in Ukraine, and who are you?
That's a very good question. I'm a mysterious one, but
I ask good questions. That's my job.
Journalists kind of that way. So, my name is Devon Woodall. Online, I'm known as Devon San Luis. Some people may recognize me as I've been on Rick the Ukrainian streams before. I work a lot with friend of the show here, Ukrainian Anastasia. I've done a huge amount out here, from interviewing mayors of formerly occupied towns to bringing attention to issues like the Chernobyl defenders, something that pretty much until I brought coverage to it, had little to no attention whatsoever from Western or domestic sources here in Ukraine. I've been coming here since 2023, and I continue to do what I do, and I figured, I'll help this guy out a little bit.
You know, it's crazy because I remember a few articles about it, but I didn't see anybody who's willing to take the time to like do really long form English speaking content. And that's always the problem, is like you might find like a 3-minute clip on the Human Safari on CNN, but has anybody sat down and got this to an English audience, these long form conversations where people can get really deep in the issue? And that's what we're trying to do with Pokrovsk. I've been filming a documentary about Pokrovsk for the better part of a year now. I started mid 2024. Actually, some of the footage at the start, I think, is going to be coming from even before that, as we're on the outskirts of, like, in front of Soldovi, as people are trying to, grad teams are trying to defend the area. And we go through a timeline from the fall of Avdiivka and the consequences of that, to the fall of Soldovi, all the way to eventually the streets of Pokrovsk. And we get that perspective of the military perspective with artillery teams, with 2 sets of drone teams who did a lot of work. We got a lot of footage of them doing the type of work that puts them in a lot of danger on a daily basis, and also brings a lot of danger to the Russians on a daily basis. And we're also going to cover the refugee perspective. And what I tried to do with this documentary is go from point A, where they're starting in their homes, all the way back to the refugee centers, where they eventually either go off with their family members, or in a lot of instances don't have anywhere else to go because they can't pay the rates in Kiev, and so they need somewhere to stay, and this has become a place for them, at least for the time being. And so I'm trying to show how the waves of humanity have left Pokrovsk and these refugee waves, and how the city has basically died. Because what I saw on the streets of Pokrovsk, with buildings burning, drones constantly everywhere, I saw maybe 10 civilians. And that doesn't mean there aren't civilians in there. There's aid groups going in there and delivering bread still, the crazy ones who are crazy enough to do it, because getting in and out of Pokrovsk, we have to stop multiple times for drones. They're delivering aid, and they tell me there's still potentially thousands of civilians under the streets of Pokrovsk, living basically under rubble or under the burnt out husks of their home, where the windows have been shattered, the like plastic tape they put after has been blown through, and the wood has been blown through. I've seen like 3 layers of wood get blown through. There's nothing but a dangling piece now because the whole city has been destroyed. And Devon was able to go out, and after we documented the wave of refugees in 2024, he went and saw some of the people who were staying in the villages, the delivery of food, and just how a lot of these villages are now just ghost towns. A lot of villages where they're good people, a lot of babushkas who, their family has lived in there for generations, have had to abandon their homes. And it's really emotional getting to see these people have to leave everything behind, where, they buried their kids in their backyard, and now they have to say goodbye with no knowledge if they're going to come back again. So I wanted to cover Pokrovsk, not only because it has cultural significance, not only because it has military significance, not only because of its humanitarian significance, but I think that Pokrovsk is an encapsulation of a cycle of what's happening after the fall of Avdiivka, the decisions that led up to this consequence of now Pokrovsk being in this type of danger, the types of mistakes that were made, and this cycle of what's being done to Ukrainian cities, which is the gutting of these communities, and that's what they are first and foremost, communities. So can you talk a little bit about what you saw when you were out with the refugees? And not with the refugees, delivering aid. Sorry, guys, I've slept 3 hours in the last
3 days, maybe.
we were originally supposed to be in Pokrovsk for 24 hours, which is already a long time period. But after like 5 failed false start evacuations, we were ended up staying a little bit longer and haven't got a lot of sleep.
Of course, we had all planned to be there, 3 of us, Yumi and Bogdan. They were unable to fit 3 people in the position just because with drone teams like this, it's very tight space that they're often working with. So I went out with the Howard R. Buffett Foundation. These guys load up their armored vans with a huge amount of aid, of water, and will head to some of these hot zone villages. This one, I believe, was about 7 kilometers, 8 kilometers away from active frontline fighting that is Ukraine is engaged in with the Russians at the moment. We were surprised this village actually still had power and internet, which is very rare in these situations, extremely so. But when we went there to deliver aid, I've been to these aid deliveries before. There's usually a big crowd that gathers. People come to one spot, get their food, their water, head back home. This time we got there, and the driver, who had been doing this for a while, was kind of surprised and looked around. You know, I didn't have a translator with me. He spoke a little bit of English. I speak a little bit of Ukrainian. We made it work, but he was like, there's no one here. So we made the decision to start literally going street by street, knocking on people's gates, honking the horn of this armored van while we're constantly like looking for drones in the air. We're constantly listening to try to hear it while we're essentially doing something similar to a drone. We're looking for people at the moment. Mm-hmm. We're just looking to help them. We're giving them big boxes of aid, of food, of water to try to help. There's a market still open in this town, but that could go away any day.
Mm-hmm. I've had the problem too during aid deliveries. It was near Touretsk, a different part of the front, where they try to find the people who they're supposed to deliver water to. But in a lot of these communities, you got to understand that they've been through hell, and I can't describe what I've seen outside of it as hell on earth. And so when they see strange people ride into the town, even if they're wearing like good gear that would distinguish them as aid workers or something, they're extremely suspicious of outsiders because these close-knit communities have been whittled down to bones. Yeah. There's like 10, maybe 15 people left, and it used to be a village that had hundreds of people, or some cases we're talking about communities that had thousands of people. And so when people outside of that community come in, I mean, there's like a lot of hesitation, and going out on the streets, you're putting yourself in danger. The reason why they've been able to, and I'm being quite frank here, to live this long while living in these communities is because they haven't gone out in the public and been in the areas where all the shelling's happening, and they've minimized their movements for one reason or the other, whether it's because they're infirm or they're old and they just don't move around, generally speaking, because they're of an older age, or because they are stubborn and they understand and they want to stay because of the war. They're still attached to their home, but they're smart and they stay behind. For whatever reason, they stay. And it's difficult sometimes to make the aid deliveries because you actually have to find them. You literally, it's not they're all just like running out to the vans and banging on it because it's too dangerous to do that.
We actually had to enlist some of the locals' help. Whenever they would see us coming to deliver aid, coming to bring it there, we would ask them, we're like, do you know where anyone else lives? Like, can you point them out? And they would have to point like, yeah, you head down this street a bit, it's 5 houses to the right that way. In some areas of the community, we would arrive, someone would be there, and then they would go grab other people. They would sprint off. They'll be like, we'll be right back. And they'd come back with, an older couple, maybe 60s, maybe a woman come back in her 50s. It's older people who are there. It's those who probably don't have any options, don't have any relatives, or they really just don't want to leave the home that they've lived in forever. Yes. That they've grown up in, that their family might have grown up in.
I mean, when you talk about these villages, like these is like multi-generational, like a lot of times people stay in the village out of that fact that that is like basically they haven't traveled within outside of 100 miles of their village. A lot of times when I go to these places, I'm the first American they've ever saw.
Yeah.
Sometimes like it's not even just American you ever saw, like they haven't seen a lot of other Europeans, maybe a Romanian or some foreign worker on occasion that comes by, but it's because they're, they're staying in their area. And there's a lot of people like this around the world. So when you're being told to leave your home with very few fiscal options because you're now relying on a pension, a very small pension, you got to go get rent in Kiev, and you got to leave all of everything you've ever owned, all your property, everything your family has passed down to you, multi-generation. It's, some people just can't do it. Some people just can't let go. Some people can't deal with that loss through leaving, and they just stay. And the ones that are wild enough still go and deliver aid. We talked to one of the guys who are helping to do these aid runs. This dude, we don't interview him for this documentary. Interview one of his workers for this documentary. He had a store in Avdiivka, and then when the Russians came, he just kept working until the end, to the point where the vans he was working with and their produce were getting bombed by drones. So eventually they pulled out as the city was falling, and then they went to Pokrovsk. And then they were in there all the way up into the end. I bought a nice pipe from them. They sell good pipes, okay? The Churchill, okay? If anybody's interested,
Make your way this way.
make your way this way for good pipes on the fly. Anyway, I went to the Churchill again in Pokrovsk while we were doing this documentary, just driving by. It's burnt ruins. He left again. He set up another one somewhere else. And the reason I say go to the Churchill when you see it is because it just pops up whatever.
Yeah.
If it falls in this new location, I 100% he's just gonna move it somewhere else. He's gonna move it someone else. This guy's a grinder, and so he just whatever he does, he works hard, and he's crazy enough to continue doing aid work. Some people remember Dima from my last documentary. I don't know. They all got something in there. They all got something to keep them going. I don't want to make this too long because we're both very tired. I do want to say a few more things. The one of the things I want to note, and I hope people pay attention to in the documentary, is that when it's so violent getting in and out of a city, civilization starts to break down. Law enforcement stops doing their job because they can't really go on the street and enforce laws. And so things like looting can occur. And I have seen looting before. And that's bad, obviously, but what cop is going to go out and risk his life from getting hit in a drone to save somebody's, copper wiring or whatever it is? Who knows? And when law breaks down, it's not just a breakdown of civilization because, the government's not there. It's because the ability to live is not there. You can't go out to the shop and get food because all the shopkeepers at this point have left. I saw some shopkeepers at Pokrovsk that stayed for a while because these people want to support their communities. But I mean, it's dangerous to go out and even get the shipment. It's dangerous to bring tomatoes into the city. It's dangerous to move on the streets in any sense is dangerous. And it's not just a question about, you can do the basic financials of insuring, like, oh, how much is it going to cost to insure these goods? What companies want to do this? But who wants to risk their life for whatever payment you're going to get delivering to these cities? And the people that are still doing it are the people who are doing it because they care, because they want to keep the lives and souls that are still in Pokrovsk alive. But because of this, things that are non-essential, and when I say non-essential, I mean this in the most bare bones word. I don't mean to be disrespectful. I just mean to say we're talking about saving the most lives possible. That's the main focus of most of these aid workers and people who care about the residents of Pokrovsk. Non-essentials has included like bodies don't necessarily get evacuated, and we documented a civilian graveyard in Pokrovsk where the people didn't have crosses. It was a very, very shallow grave. I mean, you could just see the mound. And it just had like a metal marker as if to just designate, like, don't walk here, don't dig here, don't make a trench here. And this has been something that's been documented in other cities like Mariupol. When civilization breaks down, the basic decencies of what gives, humanity just starts to go away. And so that breakdown of civilization, I want to show it over time. And that's why I've spent so much time focusing because most of my journalism is going all across the front line. I wanted to focus on one area to show what happens when war comes home for these people. And that shallow grave, really stuck with me. And I just wanted to point that out. I'm not going to say everything in the documentary. We have a lot of very interesting drone footage. A guy called Lobster, which, interesting case of a lot of interesting patches in this documentary.
yeah.
A lot of patches that's a strange reference to see there while somebody's holding an RPG, they're on me to a drone, and the
Did you
about
say what patch it is?
no, I haven't. I don't think I've said what patch it is. I don't know if I should spoil it.
I don't think you should.
I don't think I should spoil it.
Yeah.
I'll just leave it. There's two just amazing patches in this documentary. You guys can figure them out. But yeah, I love the patches. That's when the fire burnt and the house went down. The patches, oof, that was one of the hardest. My gosh. But if those are the types of patches I'm seeing, I'm gonna rebuild that collection strong and steady.
Yeah.
Strong and steady. I think we're gonna end this here, just 15 minutes, because we could talk about all the specific drone stuff, but the documentary is gonna be out in a few months, so I hope you guys watch it. Our documentary on the Battle of Pokrovsk, and welcome my cameraman, who's gonna be doing other work with me. He helped me take some photos of a leopard crew today, which is gonna be interesting. We're gonna go be filming in another region with some other soldiers in a little bit. So if when we're supposed to wake up in a few hours.
Hey.
And we're also going to be doing a bunch of other filming, doing stuff with Offbeat Research, which I've written some articles with them recently. If you're missing out on the Dylan Burns TV streams and you're a nerd enough to read something, you can read my recent article on the deserters from the 155th. I interviewed one of them. Very interesting guy. You can hear his side of the story about some problems within the Ukrainian armed forces, especially a lot of the newer units. But the 155 was a particularly bad case, and I do want to point that out. It's not like this in every unit, but I when you got to point out the problems in the gears with the machine, or nothing happens, right? That's the idea. And of course, it's important for the historical record, the main focus. Outside of that, I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your work week and weekend. And signing off from Pokrovsk. Bye-bye. Dylan, I saw your channel and thought, Thanks, Vampire. I appreciate that. That's the feeling I wanted to inspire. That's what I go home every night hoping that I can do.